Hi, thank you. So my name is Isabel Hurtubise, and I am actually an immigration lawyer. For some reason, I get that question a lot. I am a partner in my law firm, Hurtubise Weber Law, and we are a boutique law firm. We have offices in San Jose as well as in San Francisco. We do only immigration law, and we do all affirmative applications. So in addition to doing the kind of family-based immigration that most people are familiar with, I mostly focus on this side, on entrepreneurs, on employees, on businesses, and this is what I love to do. A little bit about myself. I live in San Francisco. I am a Giants fan. I was a little bit sad that they're now out of playoff contention, but it is an odd year. So really, we're not up for it until next year, 2016. I myself am an immigrant from the far-off land of Canada. Yeah. Woo! Both my parents are also immigrants. My mother's German, father Canadian. My father started his own business here. He employed Americans, contributed, paid taxes, and put children through college. My mother started her own business. She's employed many Americans, put their kids through college, and now I have my own business, and we employ Americans, LPRs, and so on. So I am very passionate about what immigrants bring to the economy of the United States, and you'll hear that over and over again. Plus, I mean, my God, if we were left to our own food devices, the restaurants would be terrible. So without further ado, we'll get started. And excuse the belly, I had a really big lunch like 6 months ago. So, okay. So I'm going to start because you're all here, you're all business people, or you're all entrepreneurs at heart, or at least interested in that, or you got very lost on the way here. And this is definitely preaching to the choir. I wish you were Congress. Well, I don't, but this is what I would tell Congress. There's an excellent business case for immigration in the United States. Immigrants are twice as likely to start a business, and that the types of businesses they start hire people. They create jobs. And if you think about that, that makes perfect sense. An immigrant is someone who has made a calculated risk and has worked hard against certain odds in order to get something done. What's an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is someone who's taken a calculated risk, who's worked hard against certain odds to reach a particular end. And I do have the sources for all this data as well, if there are people who are interested in that. More than half of all startups in Silicon Valley have at least one foreign national founder. There's a recent study that came out that makes that number even higher now. It's maybe 65%, so it's going up and up. And these are the startups that you know of. They're the small ones. I'm sure the numbers are much higher. A couple of years ago, this is the best data, is that in the engineering high-tech sectors alone, those immigrant-founded firms generated $63 billion in sales. And Congress talks a lot about Main Street, and Main Street small businesses are very important. They're the ones that build our community. They make our streets safe, interesting. They're the places we want to live, and they're where the vast majority of people work. Across the U.S., and I'm including that vast space in between the two parts that touch the ocean where nobody ever goes, 28% of them are owned by immigrants. And in San Francisco alone, it's more than half. In the San Jose, just the metro area, it's 61%. So immigrants have an enormous impact on our community. Despite this, the United States does not have a startup visa. Here's who does. Singapore, the UK, Chile has an excellent startup program. I have been accused of trying to send promising entrepreneurs to other countries. But I think it's important to understand that there are other options. And frankly, despite the fact that these places have great startup visa programs, people still want to come here, particularly for the kind of industries that you're probably involved in, for the reasons that you know well. Money's here, talent's here. So the common elements of a startup visa is that there's no personal funding required, and that somebody who actually knows what they're doing, so not the fat guy in Nebraska who works for USCIS, but someone who actually knows what they're doing has evaluated the business and said, this is a great idea and it has revenue potential. And there is not something like this here in the US. Now, why did I take all your time in order to explain this to you? And I have this chat with all my clients when I meet with them. I say, let go of all idea of what a rational process would be to try to get your business, yourself, your family here. Because I'm going to give you a list of things to do and you're going to be like, are you kidding me? Why would I need to do this? But we have to use these old, outdated visas that have been around since the 80s, like before email, and try to make them work for the kind of businesses that we have today. This is the most, if you walk out of here with one piece of information, this is the most important, is to plan ahead. So I was talking with you just a little while ago, and you were saying that you're a recent MBA graduate. Congratulations. And folks who have just gotten their H-1Bs or maybe just had them denied, they come and they talk to me and they're like, tell me the future. Explain to me what I need to be aware of. Explain to me how I need to start planning things now. And I'm always so impressed. Those people get it. They want to know these obscure rules, even if they don't necessarily have a plan for a company. And I just met with a new client yesterday who's like, yeah, I'm not ready for the visa until like the middle of next year. I'm like, really? That's fabulous. You don't want it tomorrow? Because there's a lot we can do with that amount of time. All kinds of things can matter in an immigration application. So the funding sources, the ownership structure of the company, job titles, all these things are evidence. They're all going to be evidence in the application that I'm filing for you and your company. And so the better that we can form them to fit these sort of weird little requirements, the better off that we'll be at the end. Okay, I'm just going to take a little bit of water, sorry. I'm sharing lung space, so it gets limited. Then also leverage your OPT and your B1 business visa time. So if you have OPT time, use that. Go crazy with it, because that's really when you have the most flexibility to build a business and not pay yourself market wage and actually own the business and so on. And there's a lot you can do with B1s in terms of building a business. So, leverage those two things. Immigration visa requirements are counter to the realities of starting a new business. And I'll actually amend that and say U.S. immigration visa requirements are counter to starting a new business. All right, so today we're going to talk about, or this evening, LEs and the O1A visas. These are the most common ones that I've used to help people come into the country to start a business here. Work visas, quasi-work visas, exactly what can you do on a B1, B2 visa, and the employment-based immigration category. So a visa, most of you probably already know this, but a visa will allow you to come and stay in the United States and do something. Visit, maybe go to school, maybe work. Employment-based immigration categories, those will be actually green card applications. So that's the EB1, EB2, EB3 stuff that you hear. And then a little bit about immigration reform. Always a question mark. All right, so yes, I came up with this, immigration Leo. I love it. So when someone walks in, I'm thinking about L's, E's, and O's. And I'm trying to figure out if there's a way I can fit them into one of these categories. These are the most common. They also happen to be in order of the ease and usefulness. So L's are the best. If I can get someone in an L, that gives them the most flexibility. E's, there's some good things about that. There's some bad things about that. And O1As are okay visas, but they are very evidence intensive, and they're not a green card visa either. So, that's the backwards. Okay, an L visa, again, going back to the 1980s when this visa was created. It is an intra-company transfer visa for executives, managers, employees with specialized knowledge. So there's L1A, and that's executives and managers, and there's L1B, and that's folks who have specialized knowledge. These are people who have to have worked overseas for this company for at least a year, and then are coming over to work for some relationship to that company, and transferring. We'll talk about why that can be a new business. The E1, E2 visas are treaty trader or treaty investor visas. These visas, you have to be a national of a country that has a treaty with the US, specifically for these kinds of visas. And we'll talk about which countries that is. But they're nice because they're kind of quick and easy. O1A visa, extraordinary ability or achievement in the sciences, education, business, or athletics. You know who's here on an O1 visa? Justin Bieber. So just to give you an idea of what extraordinary ability or achievement means in USCIS's eyes, Justin Bieber, with all of his DUIs and whatnot, he continues to be here on an O1A visa. So, okay, new office L visa. So USCIS has kind of wilted on their L visas. And a while ago they started saying, okay, you can transfer someone to a new office. And so that means if you've worked for your own company, let's say you have a company in Brazil, and you've been working for it, you can request to transfer yourself as the owner employee to a new business that you just formed yesterday that is related to your company in Brazil. So it's a transfer, even though it doesn't really feel like a transfer. And it doesn't even need to be related to the business of the company in the foreign country. So you get some really weird, wacky new businesses. And then I have to explain how that's related to that business, but I'm very good at that. So the employer, so again, the owner can be the employee. So if you're 100% owner, you're also the CEO, you're also the employee. So when I say an employee, that can be the owner as well, which makes the letters kind of fun, because then the owner is explaining why that employee is so important to their company. So it's like, Isabel is a brilliant lawyer, and she's critical to establishing our new office in the US, signed Isabel. And I'm sorry? It's no more of a process than a lot of the other things that we have to do. So among the many sort of silly things, that one's the least. So there has to be a foreign employer, a company that has a qualifying relationship with this new US company. That relationship can be very loose. It can actually be something like the same people that own the company in Jordan, which is what I'm working on now, sort of kind of own this company here in the US in roughly the same percentages. So the relationship can actually be pretty loose. It's a place where we have some flexibility. That employee must have worked overseas for the foreign employer for at least one continuous year out of the past year. So time spent in the US does not count. It doesn't break up that year when you're trying to add it up, but it doesn't count. So if you've been here on a B for 6 months or so on, we better be able to dig up a year within the past 3 years. And they actually will sit there and look at your I-94 stamps if it's a day or two off. And that has to be true at the day that we file. Now, the foreign employer, interestingly, if it's a spin-off or, a lot of times the foreign company will have created some other company. Well, let's make that company exist in Brazil, to use an example. And then that company, you worked for them previously as part of the parent. So there's a lot, there's some flexibility there as well. But the big one that people don't seem to understand is that if you're here on a business trip for 2 months, those 2 months don't count to your 1 year. And in rare cases, because this is such a useful visa, people have actually chosen to go back home for a period of time in order to get this in place. And that's part of what I'm talking about with planning things in advance. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Related to the first thing that you just said. Oh, okay, thank you. My question is, if you have a company, let's say in Brazil, let's say an NGO, for instance, and then you want to open up another one here, does it have to be the same, or it can be another one, a different one?
So technically, they could be doing completely different things. You could be
great.
selling bananas in one place and selling an app here in the US. There's no requirement. Cool. For a lot of other reasons, as related as they can be, we try to make that link, because you have to show that the company here is going to be successful, that the person who's being transferred is important, because boy, they learned a lot about bananas, and that's going to be critical to this app that involves fruit. Like I said, give me time, I can make anything connect. So you want them to be somewhat connected, if at all possible. Sure. Yeah. But they don't have to be doing the same job.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And what about this new company? This new company can be a parent company for the foreign. Let's assume that I have a company in Brazil, right? And this company can open a new company here. Mm-hmm. Okay? Yep. The company in Brazil will be the parent company for this one. And what about the opposite? If I open a company here to be a parent company for that company in Brazil,
you can do it that way as well.
Is it the same thing?
Yeah.
Works the same
I know
way?
particularly with Brazil, there's a lot of tax issues. So with Brazilian companies, we've done a lot of interesting ways of making that relationship work. So I always tell them, tell me what your tax lawyers want, and I'll figure out a way to make it work. So, okay, so then the person that's being transferred needs to be either an executive or manager or a worker with some kind of specialized knowledge that is critical. With things that have to do with technology, apps, and so on, often that's a person with specialized knowledge who knows the core of the programming so well that they need to be the ones here starting it off. It's not that they're just a fabulous programmer, but that they know this company's language and so on. CEOs often go into the executive manager position. The new U.S. company must have physical premise and a high likelihood of success. Physical premise can be this chair right here. You rent this chair at Sandbox Suites for $400 a month. We take a picture of it with this little sign that has your company name on it. So you're sitting there, you're going. It cannot be your beautiful apartment where you actually do work. That's a couple blocks down. But that can be physical presence, that works, and they've started to accept that. And a high likelihood of success. It's issued for a new Office L. It's issued for 1 year, and you have to say, I promise I'll go back. But, magically after 6 months, what happens? Your company determines they need to keep you for longer. So we apply for renewal. It can be 7 years for an executive or manager, and for specialized knowledge, it's 5 years. So, yeah, we have a...
Actually, just a quick question.
Sure.
So when you say in the second point here, the employee must be working internationally for at least a year, how actively does the employee need to be working for them? For example, if I have a company in China, let's say, and I'm a non-active shareholder or non-active board member, does that count?
That probably would not count. It's supposed to be a full-time employee. And we try to show that with paychecks. We try to show that. Sometimes we have to go as far as showing an org chart, some minutes, description of some of the projects you've worked on. They really want to see that year of you being an employee.
Right.
And sometimes owners or founders are not directly involved. Right. So it can be challenging. But that's where the creativity comes in.
Yep.
So,
Thank you.
okay.
Yes, please. I probably don't need this. Oh, it's not on. Okay, cool. So regarding the office space, is there the possibility of the government doing a site visit?
Oh, yeah.
And what's the likelihood of that? And I know it's increasing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing is, how many employees does the new site have to project or have over the next 12 months?
Okay. There's no rule for how many employees that you need to have, and their definition of employee is also very loose. It's not that this person has to be W-2 and so on. The office manager of Sandbox Suites would be your administrative support, for example. You'd probably have a corporate attorney. They would go in the org chart. I mean, there'd be that kind of stuff. You're absolutely right that site visits are going up, and they're seeing more and more of that. They found a couple months ago a rash of companies that all had the exact same PO box, and I went to a USCIS presentation of a person who does L1A new office. She, when people file for renewals, she's the one that actually goes out and does these audits. And she showed us pictures, and it's just kind of outrageous. It's a mailbox express somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and someone said, "This is my executive office." It is perfectly fine for you to have a reserved desk space here at Sandbox Suites, for example. I'm not promoting Sandbox. Trust me, I have clients at WeWork and Plug and Play and so on. The idea is you have to checklist mark this one requirement and have a designated space. The great thing about these, and if they come, they would come and ask at the reception. They say, "Oh yeah, this company has the desk space. The dude's not here right now. Here's his contact information." When my clients have this kind of space, I always make sure that I tell them, meet the people at the front desk, explain to them that you're here on an L1A or on an E, and that these are possibilities. I don't know about Sandbox Suites, but pretty much every other space kind of like this provides a letter when you sign the lease that says, we support immigrant entrepreneurs, and here are the benefits we offer. They can offer more space as your company grows. There's a lot of legitimate business reasons why you would take this space where you're surrounded by potential customers, future employees, collaborators, and so on, than taking some, office space. So that's probably more information on that particular. And we have a lot to go through, so I don't want to spend too much time on this one. And I will stay as long as necessary for whatever questions people have at the end as well. Why are Ls great? Ls are great because there is a green card path sitting there waiting for you. It's the EB1C. This is a category that has no line. You don't need to wait. It doesn't matter where you're from. And the requirements are pretty much everything that's written there. So if we get you here on an L and we have you here for long enough so we can do a renewal, there's a path to a green card. Also, L1 visa holders' spouses can work, and they can work anywhere. They just have general work authorization. So, sometimes when both spouses are working for a company, you kind of figure out which one would do better on the open employment market. They can support the family while the other one is working on the business. Okay, so E2. E1 is treaty trader, and E2 is treaty investor. A treaty trader is someone who has a business where they're selling goods or services, and more than 50% of their foreign sales go to the U.S. This is much more common. This is someone who's investing money in a business here in the U.S. The U.S. entity has to be at least 50% owned by the same treaty country nationals. So even though France and Germany are both treaty countries, you can't be 25% French, 25% German. It has to be 50% from the same country. So an E2 company will be, like the one I'm working on now, a Jordanian company, for example, because that's the country That's the nationality of the company. This is always the sticky part with E2s, is that the investment source, the investment funds have to come from the owners of the company. They have all these great business plans. They have all these wonderful angel investors. Everybody's all lined up. We can't use any of that cash. We have to find cash that comes from them. It can be gifts. It could be inheritance. It could be money saved over time. But it can't be a loan. And it can't be equity. I mean, it really needs to be cash. And it needs to be from a legitimate source. What that means is it's not from criminal enterprises. So, for example, if your parents give you a gift of $100,000 to start your business, well, we're going to need to show that your lovely elderly parents, who are retired dentists in Bahrain, we have to show their income tax reports and show that they didn't get that $100,000 from drug dealing. So that can be interesting. You can see how that's directly relevant to starting a business, right? It makes perfect sense. This is another way. You can purchase an existing business, and franchises are actually a great way for people to use E's to get into the country. Like I said, with L's, E-spouses can work too. So let's say your spouse buys a franchise, a FedEx or something like that. That would qualify as an E2 treaty investor as long as they're from the right country. The spouse gets to work, and the spouse can work on whatever they want, including their own company. So we've done that as well. Franchises are well set up for the requirements for E's, so they're actually fairly smooth in terms of the E treaty investor. The investment has to be substantial. There's no number, but the rule of thumb is 100,000. I've done them with a lot less money, because the reality is a tech company, just what are you going to spend $100,000 on? It shouldn't, or should be as much as possible, should not be cash in the bank. It has to be burnt money. There's somebody trying to save their money and use it to grow their business, and I'm going, ooh, great, you spent $3,000, that's excellent. How much did the CPA charge you? Wonderful, that's going in our investment number. But the key is it's a proportionality test. So how much does it cost to start the business you want? If your business plan says it's going to cost $2 million, and 1.5 of that is going to be from angel investors, and by the way, you have $100,000, that's not a substantial investment in the company. So sometimes we need to play around with the business plan to work with that. Like you have alternate paths. This is the minimum, and this is our ideal. Investment has to be at risk, so it can't be real estate, and it should be burnt money. So money, you can sell property, you can take money out of a checking account. They want to see receipts, like pizza receipts. So E-treaty visa countries. This would be a map of the world. There you go. All right, so the U.S. right now has these treaties with all these countries. These are kind of the obvious ones. So Canada, Australia, most of the European countries. A few of them, we only have treaties for E1s. Some of them are for E2s. There's always some interesting ones. Azerbaijan is one of my favorites. We did a good one from there. Over here, Mexico, Grenada, Jamaica. The one that's missing over here is Brazil, which is why, because we have a lot of people from Brazil who want to come invest in the U.S. who have great ideas, and there's not this easier path. Turkey, which I put on its own, because I'm not going to decide whether it's in Asia or in Europe. And some Middle Eastern countries, Jordan, we're doing one there now, Iran, which is another interesting one. And of course, we're missing, okay, and then here are the Asian ones. So Japan, Korea are both on here, but we don't have China. So China's a big one. E's are good. There's no green card path, but they're good because you do them at the embassy. You literally go with a binder, which you usually have to submit a couple months in advance, and you show up for an interview and you do it there. You don't have to file anything with USCIS here. And it's a face-to-face discussion with a human being about your company. So it's cheaper, it's faster, it's easier, and it can be renewed indefinitely. O1A visa for extraordinary ability. So the beneficiary has to demonstrate extraordinary ability by sustained national or international claim in their field. And this is not our definition of what's truly extraordinary. This is USCIS's definition of what's truly extraordinary. Justin Bieber, okay? So what they're looking for are other people who've said you're fabulous. That's what they're looking for. So there's always two levels to the evidence. One is that you're fabulous, and then why is that evidence that we submitted good? So if someone writes a letter and says this person's critical, they've come up with a cure for cancer, well then we have to show who's that person. Let's show his resume. Let's show articles about him showing that he's a really good source. The definition of the field is critical. If you're saying that you are an extraordinary entrepreneur, you better be Steve Jobs, or someone who's been on the cover of magazines and so on. If you are the guy who has taken Haskell programming, that one's pretty obscure, right? So if you're like the leading Haskell programmer for mobile devices, I don't even know if they do it for mobile devices. Wow, well then it's going to be a lot easier to show that you're extraordinary in that particular field. So, we got to take what you have evidence-wise and try to find as narrow a field as we can shove as much of that in there. So, you're required to establish 3 of 8 qualifications. I've never submitted an application with less than 5 because that's really what they're looking for. They're going to discount at least 2 of them. So national or international awards. And national awards can be from your own country. So I believe it was Bahrain. It was the national champion, table tennis champion from Bahrain. He came in on an O1A. So did not know that was big in Bahrain. Membership in selective organizations. So that's self-explanatory. Published articles about you. And for this, what's really important is what is the circulation of that publication. So if it's a blog, how important is that blog? Original contributions of major significance. That one's kind of hard, but if you've developed a programming language, we probably can make that one work. Scholarly articles, not always really relevant in the fields here. High salary, also doesn't come up a lot in the fields that we're in. That's what you're going for. Judge or on a panel of a major competition. This one is one that's really useful with tech folks because there are a lot of hackathons and other types of events like that. Employee at a distinguished company. Excuse me again. So I was talking with someone earlier because they were asking about this particular visa, I think it was Kabul, and I would say a little less than half the people who come to me with the idea for an O walk away with a roadmap. I take a look at everything they got, and then I say, here's what you have to go do, and then come back in 6 months. Go gather this other evidence. Let me go back to that for a minute. So O visas they don't lead you to a path for a green card, but you can renew them indefinitely. And even though you need to have a job here, there's a lot more flexibility in what that is. It's not an H-1B type situation. And you can switch between employers a lot more easily. So there's some benefits with it now. H-1B lottery. Okay.
Sorry, I have a question about.
Oh, yeah.
What do you mean it doesn't lead clear path on green card?
So we'll talk about the green card categories, and they all have their own requirements. Yep. Certain visas are, well, first of all, their intent is dual intent. So you're not just a non-immigrant, you're also an immigrant. So it's a little bit easier because you haven't come into the country saying you plan on leaving. But more importantly, the characteristics of the L, for example, match perfectly with a green card category. That's not the case for the O. There is the EB1A, which is a green card for extraordinary people, but their requirements are a little bit different, much higher, and the O doesn't lead naturally to that. When I do my roadmaps, I try to incorporate, keep these things in mind. Maybe we can eventually apply for that. But it doesn't match the way an L does or the way an H1B does with EB2s and EB3s. Is that kind of?
Yes. So basically, in the long run, it's easier to go with an L1 or.
Yeah, well, it depends on what your plan is. If your plan is to stay for a good long time and to have the kind of permission to work that gives you flexibility to do anything, then that's going to be a green card. But an L is risky, and it can take a while. So there's reasons why it may just be easier for you and the business that you want to build to go with something different. One important thing whenever you're coming in the U.S., and I'm sure all of you are aware of this, is intent. When you walk in the border, they want to know, what's your plan? Are you going to go back? So tourist visas, B1 business visas, those kinds of things are all non-immigrant intent. So you're coming and you're saying you're definitely going to leave. Certain visas are dual intent. So you're saying, yeah, I might stay, I might go back, so you'll have less issues entering at the border. And if you've been here for 15 years on an E, which is a non-immigrant visa, then they're going to start saying, I thought you said you were going to go home eventually. God, I'm dying to go home, but I just got to keep renewing this thing because my business needs me, So, so it's the intent issue comes up as well.
On the previous slide, you had burnt money. What's the definition of burnt money?
Money you've already spent.
Okay, so you need to show that you've spent 100 grand.
No, it's best. So whatever amount that we're going for to show that you've made a substantial investment, let's say it's 40,000. I want to see as much of that as possible is already spent. There'll always be some amount of cash in the bank, and you can't run a business without operating capital, but it's proportional. So it's hard to explain why a company that's only spent 17,000 needs 250,000 cash in the bank.
But that money or the burnt is in the current company, the company that's in another country. Is that right?
It has to be burnt money that's been spent in the U.S.
It has to be spent in the US.
Yes. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear yet.
So how do you spend the money in the US? Do you go to the company first, spend the money first without
That's a really interesting question. Gosh, that seems like a strange way to try to get new businesses to come here, doesn't it? Yeah. So I have somebody I'm working with now who has an app company, and he's had to spend a lot of time in the U.S. To going to all the different conferences and Collide and all those things to promote his app and to meet and to work with people. So all the costs, we have found every receipt from everything he ever did over the past 3 years. Yeah, and for him, that's for that particular company, because it was an app company, I could justify that as money that was required. And then we have to link it to him, and then we have to show he didn't get it from drug deals, so. Yeah. So it's, these are, this is what I mean by creative.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Right. So instead of like spending money on the company, how if I already spent money in education?
On what?
Education?
No.
No.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter.
that's not going to count. Yeah. Salary to the founder won't count. Money paid to contract employees in a foreign country who've developed the technology, that unfortunately won't count. It could be that if there were some certification programs or very specific things like that, then maybe I can come up with an argument that would work for that. But having just gotten a Bachelor of Science, that's, I wish.
Okay.
So, okay, I am running very low on time, so I'll just sort of race through this. Everyone here familiar with the H-1B lottery? Anyone here on an H-1B? If you don't want to, yeah? Did you get it recently in this past? No? You got it before they had the lottery system. Oh, that's good. Okay, so 85,000 visas. This is, H-1Bs are the professional work visa. There are only 85,000 of them. Last year, or for this past lottery, 233,000 applications were submitted. So somebody had to pay a lawyer. People had to put all this stuff together. These people were interviewed. I mean, you know, it's not a small thing to file for an H-1B application. They're like this thick. More than half the applications were returned unopened. Didn't even make the cut to be opened. They were just sent back. This included the checks. The government didn't even deposit the checks. Okay, when does that happen? And one of the results of that is that the requirement of specialty occupation, which used to be a lot looser and could include things like management consultants and so on, they're just not bothering with looking at. If you don't meet their black and white definitions, they're just tossing that application. Okay, then there's some special countries that we have treaties with that have work visas that are like H-1Bs, they're like H-1B lights. And they have caps that don't get reached, or requirements that are much easier to meet. TN, which is the NAFTA visa, we have this treaty with Canada and Mexico. They have a list of permitted occupations, which includes all the professional occupations you can imagine, and things like recreational therapists, like a music therapist. And Canadians, not Mexicans, but Canadians can actually apply at the border. So they show up with their job. There's a Canadian here, I believe, right? So are you on a TN by chance?
No, I didn't graduate university, sorry.
Oh, okay. You do need to have a bachelor's degree. But it drives people from other countries wild when I tell them, you know, if you're Canadian, you could have gone with your plane ticket to the Toronto airport. You go a few hours early. You show them your job offer, a few other documents. They give you a 3-year work visa, and then you fly in. Yeah, that's what it takes. It's non-immigrant, but this one they just renew, and they just don't care. I mean, you're Canadian, so we're not threatening people. There aren't that many of us. So I've had folks who've come to me who've been on TN for 20 plus years. Some folks come on an H-1B, they run out of their H-1B time, they're like, all right, I'll go to a TN. Not a problem. E3 visas are great. So these are Australians. Anyone here from Australia? Okay. Have you considered an E3? Okay, but you're aware of them?
No.
Really? Okay, they're fabulous. You should get one.
Still playing
So,
my phone.
I'm sorry?
But at least it's still playing my phone.
Yeah, now I can tell you're from Australia. Okay. So the requirements are very similar to an H-1B, but the cap has never been reached. It's a non-immigrant, it's good for 2 years, can renew indefinitely, and unlike H-1Bs and TNs, the spouse can work. So just that, no rhyme or reason, Australian spouses can work if you're here on E3. So we do a lot of these. You do need to have the bachelor's degree. You do need to be in a specialty occupation. The other great thing about E3 visas is you can also apply it just straight at the consulate, and you can apply at any consulate in the world. So, you know, you go to the Bahamas for the weekend, apply at the consulate there, come back, and you have your work visa. So, so start working with your countries to get these treaties in place with the United States. And then we have H-1B ones, which are basically H-1Bs for folks from Singapore and Chile. The cap has never been reached, same as an H-1B. They're a bit shorter, but they can be renewed indefinitely. There's no cap on those. So.
Quick question. So let's say you're not a citizen of any of these countries,
Yeah.
but if there's a way to get a permanent residency to any of these countries, so let's say I get a permanent residency
Right.
in Chile,
Mm-hmm.
and then can I use that to get an H-1B one?
You need to be a citizen. So residency for Australia, I know, is pretty easy, for example. A lot of folks have that. And that's unfortunately not something you can use to get an E3. You need to actually become an Australian citizen. I think that takes a whole nother year, maybe. So have you had a similar experience? Are you a residency?
I've tried exploring the options. I've ruled it out because
Yeah. See, you could have just called me. I would have told you. Sorry, dude. Hope you had a good time. So, and then these are the quasi-work visas that people are probably quite familiar with. Student visa, the OPT, and the extension for STEM degrees. So you can have, almost 2.5 years if you're here on a STEM degree. You can use OPT to start your own company. The whole issue here is just getting your school to say that that's fine. They're the little gods of those fiefdoms. They control your F1s. And if you can get them to say, yes, that's related to your degree and we support you doing that, you can go and have so much flexibility during this time. And then the minute you get that approval, you call me or you do so beforehand, and we figure out how you're going to best use that time to set it up so you can eventually hire yourself, which is a whole nother thing. So the J1s and H3 trainees, I just have those up there. If you have questions, ask me. They're not super useful. B1 visa. So the B visa and the ESTA visa waiver allows people to come here for business reasons. You have to say you're here for business. You're not here to work, even though you consider it work. You're here for business. It's a huge distinction with USCIS. You can attend meetings, conferences, board of directors, trade shows. You can arrange for funding, form a company, sign a lease. You can hire people, interview people. There's a lot that you can do. So, or attend an accelerator program as well. So that could be a 6-month accelerator program. That would be fine. The key stuff here, and these are all things that look like a CEO's job. So sometimes I get folks who are like, oh my God, I've done all these things and it's my work as the CEO. I said, oh no, you were conducting business. You're a founder. What can you not do? You cannot engage in activities that would constitute local employment. This includes building an app and selling it for $1 on an app store. That is work. Because an American could have made that $1. You can do it for free. You can give us your apps for free. Thank you. But you can't sell them. You can't get paid by the U.S. company if you're here doing something for them, but they can cover your travel expenses, which if you're staying in San Francisco can be pretty good. Yeah. All right. Employment-based immigration. So I just have a few minutes. If folks need to leave, please feel free. There are cards up there, and do contact me with any questions. So I'll just kind of lay these out here. This is what I was talking about. Now, the reason that these are in categories is because there are increasing amount of lines for each of these. So for EB1s, there's no line. If you qualify and you get it, you're good to go. For EB2, there's some, I have down there, there's a backlog. If it's based on what country you're from. So right now there's backlog for India and for China. And then it gets worse as you go down the line. EB1 are extraordinary ability visa, so it's kind of like the O1A that we talked about, and but it's on steroids. And all of these, let's step back for a moment, all of these can be applied for from anywhere. You don't need to be here. You don't need to be on an H1B. You know, sometimes some companies who really want you and they're getting very frustrated with the H1B lottery, they'll just directly sponsor you for a green card, and that's possible. On extraordinary ability, you sponsor yourself because you're extraordinary. It's very evidence specific. It's you really need to be thinking ahead of time as to what you need to show for that. There's this odd little EB1C category, which, as I mentioned, works for L1A visas. So people who came here as managers or executives on that transfer visa, they can apply. Their company does have to sponsor them, but the requirements, completely match up. In the EB2 category, there's this special exception called the National Interest Waiver. And this is one of President Obama's sort of reform agenda items that he announced last November. Excuse me one moment. Now no one has questions? Thanks. Okay. Thanks for helping me out. And it's kind of like an extraordinary ability light application. So you're saying that it is in the national interest of the United States to have you come here. You're not quite extraordinary, but you're gonna be. And here are all the reasons why. The nice thing about that is that you can apply for it on your own. There's not a wait for it. It's always been a very vague category and hard to get. And one of the reforms, as I mentioned, that Obama asked USCIS to do is tell us what the heck is in there, and explain to us how an entrepreneur specifically can fit in this category. So they haven't done that yet, but that's something we're really looking forward to. What kinds of things would an entrepreneur need to show so that they could sponsor themselves for a green card because their company, what they're building, is in the national interests of the United States. It's going to create jobs and so on. The EB-2 is for anybody who has an MBA or some kind of a master's degree. And you need to be sponsored by an employer, and they need to go through the PERM process. Is anyone here gone through the PERM process? Know what the PERM process is? Okay. The PERM process is the reason why everybody wants to go to EB1 and EB2 and IW. PERM process is basically the Department of Labor saying, yes, there's nobody else out there that can do the job but this guy. There's no American out there that can do it. It takes about 6 months. It's really expensive. It's painful. And it's the reason why your employer may not want to take that next step if you're here on H-1B. Sometimes that can be a bit of a negotiation. EB-3, there's a backlog for everybody, but especially India and China. And then there's another category for victims of crime, some other special categories, green card categories. EB-5, is anyone here familiar with EB-5?
Investment.
Yeah. So this is a direct to green card investment visa. So if you have loads of money and you don't want to go through the L's, the E's, the O's, all this stuff, you just want to get a green card for you and your family, you can apply through EB-5. They want to see $1 million of your money. If you can show that it's a targeted employment area, which is its own issue, then it can be $500,000. Everyone seems to think it's $500,000, but that's actually harder to show than one would imagine. This has to be your own money again. You need to show where you got it. It can't be investor money. So you need to show that within 5 years you're going to create 10 full-time jobs. And when you get the card, you're only going to have it for 2 years. And at that 2-year mark, they're going to want to know how you're doing. Have you created those jobs? Where are you in the process? When this green card process, application process was introduced, nobody used it because it's really hard to come up with all of the requirements for an EB-5 are rather extraordinary. What they did about 15 years ago is the government created regional centers which pools investments. And you can go in there and buy essentially a share of a regional center. They're all in targeted employment areas somehow. They figured out how to do that. And you pay them money and they do this and they give you back, not guaranteed, but 1% or so on it. So you're basically buying a green card. EB-5 doesn't work for your own company very well. As you can see that people kind of vote with their feet to not go that way, partly because the large amount of funds that have to come from your own pocket, and partly because all the many requirements that go along with it are really not conducive to the kind of things you want to do to have a flexible company that can really move forward and grow. And there are other options. Okay, so I'm a little bit past my time. I put up here some of the things that President Obama announced on November 20th, because we've been watching this very closely. I talked about clarify and expand the EB-2 national interest waiver. That's going to be very important for entrepreneurs if they ever get that in place. There's some other programs that he's asked them to put in place to clarify. So we're waiting to hear from USCIS about those. The one thing on here that has happened is that H-1B spouses for people who've had their I-140 approved can work. And if you're in that category, you already know it, and your spouse has already applied for work authorization. So yeah, so that's what I got, and I'm happy to answer more questions. Yes.
So if someone is in H-1B,
Uh-huh.
say for example somebody is in H-1B and their green card is getting processed.
Yep.
So at what stage can they start a company and hire people?
They have to actually have the green card. So in order to work at their own company, they can do all those things, well, a lot of the things that people on a B visa that I mentioned before can do. So if you're here on an H-1B, you can start a company. There's no reason why you can't start an LLC or a corporation. You can own the company. You can help hire that company. You could be on the board of directors. You just can't work for that company. Once you get your green card, you're freed from your H-1B visa requirement that you only work for that particular employer, so you can work for yourself.
Okay, so is it a green card and not the EAD that you get right before green card?
What you're talking about is in an I-140 situation, you're not going to have that freedom. You're not going to have an EAD like you do in a family-based. So when you're applying for your spouse for a green card, you apply for them to have work authorization. And once you get that card, you get it usually before the green card. You can use that to work wherever you want. But you don't get that kind of permission until you get the green card on a work path.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
About the L1 visa, what the government understand as a successful enterprise, and what are the requirements for renew after the first, second, or third year?
Okay, that's an excellent question. So anyone who's coming here on an L1A new office visa is already going to be thinking ahead to the fact that they've only got a year, and really they've only got about 6 months. So what does that mean? You don't necessarily need to hire people. And if you do, it can be people who are on commission, salespeople that are on commission, or brand ambassadors, you know, at local universities who are going around telling people about your app. I mean, it can be things that are much looser than what we imagine. It really matters about it. It relates to your business plan. So what did you say you were going to do in 6 months or in 1 year? Did you say you were going to launch something? Did you say you were, you know, what were the milestones that you had in place? And that's what we're going to be looking at, showing them. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yes. For the renewal?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
If I set up certain milestones, and there's no something like this, oh, you need to put $100,000 or hire 10, 20 people?
Nope. No. Another nice thing about ELS is they're not looking at dollars that you spent in the US. Although I will take every drop of anything that looks like success or contribution to the US, and I will shove it in there one way or another. Even if it's not necessarily relevant, put all kinds of stuff in there. Okay, yes.
Does it matter if you register an LLC or a corp? And can that be in Delaware, or does it have to be near where your office is or where you're living?
It doesn't matter at all. It just has to be a legal entity. A lot of, you know, you do need to be registered as a state where your business is located. So for folks who happen to form their company in Delaware for reasons I still don't really understand, for small companies, there's not that much of a tax advantage. You would need to be registered in California because you'll have your physical office space in California right here. So, all right, yeah.
I'm working with a partner who is relocating to Houston because his wife is American. So we're thinking of moving at least a part of the business to Houston because of the low wages, and even I'm from the Netherlands. Even compared to the Netherlands, it's cheap there for us. So what does that mean for me?
Where's the business located?
For the time being, in the Netherlands, and then an office in Houston.
Yeah. Oh, you mean the fact that you would intend to continue to reside here?
Maybe,
but you
yes.
would potentially want to have a visa that would sponsor you. Yeah, as long as we can show reasons that you need to be here and not in Houston, And, you know, I can come up with a lot of them right now. I don't even know what the business is about.
Sounds good.
But you really need to be here. You cannot be in Houston. It's
I need to
critical
be
the
here, yeah.
business. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's going to be a page and a half of the cover letter.
Okay. I get it. Thank you.
Yeah. So, but we just need to come up with a reason for that. Yeah. No, I got a guy who lives in New York whose main business person is in Florida, and he likes working down in Southern California. So that's kind of been an interesting one, but we've justified it.
So it doesn't mean I have to move to Houston as well. That's basically
Okay,
the
that would
question.
be worse than having to go back to the Netherlands.
Exactly,
right?
I know.
I've been to Houston. So yeah, no, we would avoid that at all costs, because then you just withdraw the application. You're like, okay, I'll just go back. So.
Say if I, are you ready? If I set up an art gallery business, then if I invest in a painting, it's quite an easily tradable kind of item. Is that going to qualify as a at-risk investment?
So you're talking about inventory, and so I'm doing one for a furniture store now, for example. So the guy has to have inventory, and so in that specific case, those assets would absolutely count. If you owned the building, we couldn't justify that. But the assets that are the core of the business, yes.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, I've got a second part. Can you only work for that one business, or can you do anything else at all?
You can only work for that one business, yeah. And on an L, on an E, whatever visa it is, just like the H-1B, it's going to have the name of your company. You know, Joe Schmo, art dealer. It's going to be on there. That's the only place you can work. That's why sometimes I get a little bit creative with spouses. You know, these are sort of mom and pop businesses sometimes.
I've just one more question,
Yeah.
and it's regarding the L1 visa.
Mm-hmm.
So does the foreign employer have to demonstrate the ability, well, one, that they have X amount of funds, and then the ability to pay for the wage class or the salary of the individual who is transferring to the new office?
Okay, so that's a good question. Interestingly, they don't even have to be the ones paying the salary of the person. Some people are worried that they can't have the foreign company pay it, but it doesn't matter where that salary is being paid. They don't look too much at the foreign company. As long as it exists and you've worked for them for a year, they don't really look at it too closely. We need to make sure that it continues to exist throughout the life of your L visa so that it's still a transfer. But they're not going to be looking at how strong that company is, or if it's growing, or its funds.
I'm assuming after, say, when you're applying for your extension,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you should demonstrate proof that you have been on a salary. Will they need to see that?
You're not going to need to show like some sort of a minimum that you're being paid what other Americans would be. I like to show that person's been paid a salary, but the reality is, you're the CEO of a startup. You're not making a lot of money. So a lot of compensation will be your living expenses, the car, that kind of stuff. All that stuff will be paid for by the company because that shows the company spending money in the U.S. on behalf of the employee, rather than salary. It doesn't, there's no technical requirement. It's about strength of the evidence. Yeah. So I'd want to look at the whole picture. And if I think that looks like it's gonna be an important part, then we'll work on that. But I can think of times where maybe it wouldn't be. So.
Just to.
We have a question for someone who hasn't asked a question.
Thank you.
So.
I was just wondering if you can come into the country on a B1 or something similar if you've got an application pending for a different visa class.
Yes, you absolutely can, and that happens quite a bit. I always work with my clients to make sure they're prepared at the entry when the officer asks them questions, and that they have all their paperwork and everything in there. But yes, you can absolutely do that.
Someone told me that if I apply for L1, it's not I should not come to the United States using my B1 visa.
Well, I don't know who that person is, but you are, if you have a pending application, you can absolutely be going back and forth. There's no problem there. And what they may be talking about is where you process. So with ELS, you need to get permission from USCIS first. It has to be approved. And then you can either do it as a change of status from whatever current status you are in the US. So if you're here on a B, you just want to stay put, and then they change your status to an L. With L's, I always recommend that people consular process. You can be in the U.S. and your interview is next week, and you hop on a plane tomorrow, and that's fine. For many reasons I can go into, that tends to work better. In which case, you're going. I mean, I have tons of clients that are going back and forth.
Yeah. Have you done the EB2? So you were talking about EB2 national interest waiver.
Mm-hmm.
Does your company? I mean, do you do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they are. The kinds of clients that we have tend to not fit well in that category. So yet, until Obama gets his response from USCIS on how they're going to clarify this category. That's folks who've made scientific achievements, certain things that you can easily show. But yeah, we have done them.
So right now I'm in a OPT situation, and I'm thinking to incorporate within 1 month. And so I was like wondering which kind of benefit should I have, like of hiring myself, as you said like before. So or
Yeah.
maybe we have to talk. Like,
Yeah,
more on that.
yeah. I definitely want to talk to you a lot more. How much time you have left. A lot of folks are, they want to start their company and then hire themselves on an H-1B. And it's incredibly hard to do that for a lot of reasons. One of which is you need to not be the owner. You need to not control the company. The company needs to be able to fire you in order for you to be an H-1B employee. Secondly, are all those reasons we had up there about why H-1Bs are just increasingly difficult to go through that process. Yeah. So we would want to consider some other options. Yeah. And it's always good to have good friends from E2 countries, with green cards and so on, people you trust who can hold your equity for a few years. Just saying.
You mentioned that for an L1, I believe, you need to have the office in your home country, right? And leave it there.
There needs to be a foreign entity.
What does that mean?
Some legal entity in another country.
Okay.
Some company. Every country is slightly different definitions. I think we're working with a UK company now that was a sole trader for a while, and we're having a lot of problems justifying them as a foreign company.
But more than a postbox. It needs to be more than a postbox. I mean, we can do the same trick.
It doesn't need to be a physical company. It needs to be a legal entity. So I want some document in Dutch that says the king has said this company exists.
Yeah.
If you live out of a post office box, I don't really care because I don't need a picture of that. I need a picture of this here.
I get it.
But I want to see that company, and I want to see some paychecks, or something that shows that you've worked for them. Yeah. So.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
With the Australian Specialty E3 visa, how difficult is that for me to get? Is it something I can just do on my own, or is it something I need to engage you for?
You need an employer sponsor. Sorry if I wasn't clear.
Okay.
So an employer who wants to hire you. But for example,
But it could be my own company here, right, hiring me.
Yeah, but then you have the same problem as the one I mentioned with H-1B, which is you need to show that the company has the ability to fire you, that you're truly an employee.
Oh,
and there's a lot of complications there.
Right.
But I have some companies who, like, somebody were looking for architects. It's an architecture company, and they had 3 great applicants. And they called me up and they said, we have these applicants. Which one should we hire? I said, hire the Australian. They can work for you in 2 weeks, and everyone else, it's going to take a really long time. So,
Okay.
I hope they're a decent architect. I don't know.
Maybe you can tell us about the foreign founders. I mean, there are a lot of foreign founders here coming and starting a company, right? A startup.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a visa they are using usually, or
The foreign.
Yeah, the foreign founders.
Okay.
I mean.
When I've gone to things, actually Rob has invited me to things where international entrepreneurs have spoken
Yes.
about their immigration experience. I find it fascinating. Everyone is a completely different story.
Oh, really?
Everybody is a completely different story. Yeah.
Okay.
So I wish, that startup visa that we're going to have at some point when somebody wakes up and realizes we're going to be left behind in the future economy if we don't do it, that'll be the one everyone will use.
And regarding the prices and time, in L visa, for example, so how long does it take for getting it, or how cheap or expensive it is? Can you tell something about that?
Yeah, so for L's right now, I'm telling people to think 8 months from the beginning. Putting together the paperwork and the evidence at the beginning takes a lot longer than most people think it will. Okay. So that alone takes 2-3 months. Processing times right now for new office L's are running about 5 months or so. And then if you want to tack on the fact that you have to then go to the consulate, which is still a lot easier, that'll take a little extra time as well. So you're not looking at less than 8 months. But that's plenty of time for you to be here and be doing the kinds of things that you need to do.
Okay,
yeah. So the green card applications can take years. Not the ones where you have to wait in line. Like the EB1, I think the processing times for those right now are 6 months. But it takes about that much time to get the kind of evidence that I'm going to require before we submit an EB1. E's are the shortest by far because you put them together. Most consulates say, give us the binder 2 months in advance. You have your interview, and then you're done. In Canada, it can be even shorter. So that could be a turnaround of a couple months. Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Can I see the Warren visa application?
Are you going to take a picture of my proprietary intellectual property?
Sorry.
Is that what you're going to do? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, so I'd like to ask each eight elements. So at minimum, at least what kind of accomplishment I need for each?
So that would be a sit-down meeting between us because I need to understand your field better to give you a better idea.
Computer science, for example.
Okay. So for computer science, we're looking at 5 of these, and the standard ones are going to be if you've worked at a big company or gotten a high salary, those are always really nice because it's clean. Well, it's what you need to live in the Bay Area, basically. But I like to show it compared to the national average. They're probably going to want to see it compared to the Bay Area, but it's going to be something higher than what that person would normally have been paid. So if you're a Google engineer and every other one at that level is making 150 and you're making 150, we're going to have a hard time justifying that. But if we can show that it's some higher amount, bonuses are also a really nice way to show the high salary. People who have bonuses that are like twice their salary, and that's something that shows up in small companies a lot, because they just can be smaller. The published articles, blogs about you, people talking about you, posts about you, that's one that has been really good in the computer science tech. And then as I was talking about, judge or on a panel of a major competition. I mean, in the tech world here, there are so many conferences, competitions, all sorts of things. So you go to them, you start volunteering at them, you call up people and you ask to be a judge or you get involved in that kind of stuff. Those are ones that have worked really well in the tech field. Could I show myself having been here? I don't know if that would count. Again, it's the 2 layers of evidence. It's one that you did it, and then why that is so great. So what would I be looking at? How many people were here? What was the competition to be a speaker? What's involved in that kind of thing? That sort of stuff. So when I meet with people to go over an O1A and I develop a roadmap for them, I mean, that's a pretty intensive evidentiary process. So it's more than just a a discussion. It's more than even just a consultation. I like to give people a very specific list of stuff that makes sense for them to do. So, all right. Any other questions? Yeah.
Can you apply for any of these if you have been out of status in your previous history?
Yes. You can't be out of status now, and we have to deal with why you were out of status and what occurred at that point in time. But there's no specific prohibition that keeps you from applying. So, but I really want to know why you asked that question. No, hey, it's okay. I judge no one. So,
say that you decide to open up a business that's in partnership with the city hall.
With City Hall?
Yeah, because it's something for the city.
City Hall questions. I'm very curious as to what's going on over here. All right.
Is that apply for any specific or what kind of visa would be?
If it's like a nonprofit or if it's non-governmental or something like that? No, they go through the same process. The one benefit of being a nonprofit is that you're not subject to the H-1B cap. So you don't have to go through that whole lottery system. You can hire folks as long as they qualify. So that's one benefit.
So my question is, if say you are already working in H-1B for several years and going through the green card process and all those things,
let's just say,
but
Intern,
you have found two other people. Let's say they are doing the startup and I couldn't join because I don't have the green card. And now it's the time where we are ready to launch the product.
Yeah.
So technically, though, I've been advising, which is not a full-time job, which I can do. And if I want to join that startup now and I can become employee, even though I know they are my friends and stuff, then transferring the H-1B and continuing the green card process, how complicated it is for our startup to figure that out?
It is very difficult for a startup to hire anybody because they need to show that they can pay them prevailing wage.
Right.
So that's already one challenge. But also you have to be an employee. So that means you can't have control. You cannot be in control of your own employment. So we would need to show that the company can hire and fire you.
Yeah.
And that they can determine your wage and so on. So that would be something where I'd really need to get into what the structure looks like. How much do you like these guys? Do you trust these people? You know, like, and do you maybe just want to continue being owner, director until you have the ability to work there under a green card?
So on the prevailing wages part, can the equity be spaced out as like vesting every month to compensate that as part of package to show the prevailing wage and just not cash component?
Very, very complicated. We'd have to sit down and speak about that. That's something that comes up very commonly in these situations. So, you know, there's different kinds of equity. You know, there's voting equity and lower level equities and so on. So there's ways it can be structured, but it's very complicated. So it can work. Just gotta be creative. So, all right. Well, I will be here. Thank you all so much for staying and for asking such great questions. I really love it. And please come, start businesses, hire people, bring money and culture and better restaurants. So, thank you.